Your Excellencies, esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the chance to take part in this outstanding series of events. I'm personally very grateful and especially pleased to represent the CT Studies Centre at the University of St Andrews in Scotland. Although it is thanks to the inspiration and foresight of a splendid group of monks, now over 600 years old, St Andrews is a modern institution with a forward outlook. And it founded the first CT Studies Centre in Europe 25 years ago this month. And we will celebrate that honour very shortly. Professor Boaz-Gonor challenges us all to understand the present and future of terrorism, to prepare for the future. And in these short minutes, I seek to advance a conceptual shift in counter-terrorism preparation for the future, which delivers operational and practical benefits, which I think have been proven. Comprehensive and inclusive counter-terrorism is a key part of the response to 21st century terrorist threats. It's surely noteworthy that the first high-level meeting of global intelligence and security agency chiefs, convened at the personal instigation of the current UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, highlighted this very theme. That meeting of high-level chiefs of agency, the first, took place in June 2018 at the UN headquarters in New York. And it's very welcome news that this conference will convene in 2020. I hope that our deliberations may play some small part in what I hope will be the success of that reconvening next year. There are, I would invite you to consider, compelling reasons why the comprehensive and inclusive concept is an essential component of the future of terrorism. The rationale, I think, begins with the evolving threat. To quote Andrew Parker, who is the excellent Director General of the UK Security Service, MI5, today there are more terrorist activity coming at us more quickly, and it can be harder to detect. It is multidimensional, evolving rapidly, and operating at a scale and pace which we have not seen before. The July report this year, produced by the immediate speaker before lunch, Edmund Fitton-Brown, at the UN, the Analytical Support and Sanctions Monitoring Team, if I can commend it to you, it's an absolutely first-class analysis and probably the best open source intelligence review of Al-Qaeda and indeed Daesh that you will read. This report contains the words, "The current abatement of such attacks," he's referring to IS, "therefore may not last very long, possibly not even until the end of 2019. Meanwhile, more ISIL-inspired terrorist attacks will occur, possibly in unexpected locations. This unusual combination of threat severity, the span of attack methodology from orchestrated assaults to low-key events, the numbers of potential attackers, the dangers presented by foreign terrorist fighters, the proliferation of terrorists providing spaces, means that no nation state can claim to be able to provide effective public protection by reliance on public sector resources alone. And that is at the heart of the argument for a comprehensive and inclusive approach. I put before you that the days of the perfumed garden where state security forces secreted themselves in walled courtyards, enjoying cool shade and breezes and tinkling fountains, and spoke in conversations, but only amongst themselves, are history. A useful practical example of this reality is to consider the protection of critical national infrastructure, the CNI. Let me use the UK as an example. Within our system, we have 13 sectors of CNI, and dealing with them alphabetically. I won't bore you. I'll start at C, which is chemicals, and go to W, which is waste and sewage. Although critical to the national activities, you will note that these sectors are not run by the government. As the UK strategy contest states, our CNI is mainly owned and operated by the private sector and is linked under international networks and supply chains. It is essential that we continue to work in partnership with all the private sector and through international collaboration to ensure continuous improvement in our security and resilience. Thus, the UK model of protection of CNI, which I think is commonplace around the world, is to challenge from developments in cyber threat, use of the internet for terrorist purpose, and attacks in crowded places where protection and responsibilities are complicated and blurred. Those factors of internet abuse of the internet and the threat to crowded places have changed the nature of the CNI. For a very insightful description of the 10 categories of terrorist abuse of the internet, I recommend to you the latest ICT report entitled the International Cyber Terrorism Regulation Project, which was published in the 31st of July this year and produced by the authors and organisers of this very conference. This is an important document. I'll refer to it again this week, which I commend to you for your serious study. I hope you noted that Brian Fishman of Facebook and Adam Hadley, Technic Against Terrorism, both commended this document when they spoke yesterday. The significance of dependence on network information technology is that only a new category of CNI is created, so now we have 14 cyber rather than the traditional 13, but the 14th cuts across all the 13 and impacts them very significantly. If we look at the antecedents of the comprehensive and inclusive debate, they are very creditable. And a number of respected authors have made important contributions. Thus, forgive me again for a UK example, Sir David Oman, the third Sir David in this story, who was the UK Intelligence and Security Coordinator within our Cabinet Office immediately after 9/11, has produced an important book in 2010, again a worthy read, entitled Securing the State. Sir David's theme is that modern societies need to move from the traditional secret state, my walled courtyard, to the modern protecting state. Describing the origins of CNI as within key point protection and civil defence arrangements of the Cold War era, he argues, and I quote, "A very different approach is now appropriate if we are to have the protecting state in which the active participation of individuals, communities and companies needs to be sought to reduce the overall level of risk." Further, I would suggest to you that it's instructive to examine the topography and profile of national estates, by which I'm meaning the built environment and the land use of countries. The ownership of places to which the public are entitled to enter on payment or otherwise is overwhelmingly in private hands, not with the public sector. Furthermore, the capacity of the public sector to provide security at these venues is finite, with the result that the security measures at these locations, shopping centres, malls, and other crowded places, are mostly provided by the burgeoning private sector security staff who can be in-house or contracted services. The result is a national patchwork in most of our countries without design for a security purpose and certainly without a security master plan. In a world of low threat from violence, these dangers are spontaneous or arrangements which are haphazard may be an acceptable risk. But I suggest that's not the world we're living in now or the foreseeable future. Where recurring acts of terrorism, as is our current reality, are taking place in crowded places and elsewhere, and the threat is persistently high, the balance of public risk is perhaps altered, and it may be timely and appropriate for us to consider modified arrangements. The fundamental question is whether the past history of public and private security has produced an effective regime for public places which provides a reasonable degree of effective and balanced protection for people who use these places and seek to go about their business freely and with confidence. Israel is probably the preeminent global example of where this has been addressed and where there is a comprehensive endeavour by way of response. Some other jurisdictions have made very welcome progress. For example, the United States Department of Homeland Security has been very effective in its outreach to a very wide span of the private sector. The splendid NYPD has an outstanding record in police and private sector programs such as the SHIELD initiative and the Partnership initiative in southern Manhattan. Yet another layer of complexity of the national state in private hands is that the label of owner or occupier has many variations. Large commercial concerns feature strongly throughout, on the profile of a national estate. But by far the largest segment of that estate is made up of small and medium business enterprises, the SMEs, hairdressers and coffee shops. By definition, SMEs are stretched to invest in security or to take time off work to attend well-meant advisory sessions put on by public sector experts. More widely, the totality of the concept of comprehensive and inclusive CT depends far beyond the important example of crowded places. I suggest it embraces all communities, the whole of civil society, indeed the whole non-public sector. Threat developments will inevitably change focus and priorities. In the last few hours at this event, we've had mention often of the March attacks this year in Christchurch, New Zealand, and the Easter attacks on Christian churches and other venues, sadly in Sri Lanka. These are deadly examples of a growing concern about the vulnerability of faith values of all types across the world. But I think there's an interesting lesson there. The targeting of faith values is a strong reason to include faith leaders and faith communities in a whole of society CT strategy. The best example I've ever seen of a security initiative for a faith community is the work of the United Kingdom Community Security Trust, which has been providing excellent reassurance over a period of many years to the whole of the UK Jewish communities and playing an absolutely vital role in partnership with the security services. But these beacons of good practice, although to be welcomed and celebrated, are not at the state of overall progress, where, to be blunt, the picture is more patchy. Too often, the public sector view of the private sector is focused on communication service providers, notably the social media, and on the private sector security provider industry, arches and guards, whereas a much more holistic understanding and outreach would yield far greater benefits. CT leaders in the public sector are not routinely trained to comprehend that the best of CT leadership includes positively influencing security contributors who are out with the public sector security command structure. I think the best of public sector CT leadership is about realizing that working effectively with people who are not on your payroll is key to a modern approach. How can we move forward the debate leading to a more comprehensive and inclusive strategy? The start of the roadmap is information sharing. I do not include classified information in this exercise unless the classified information can be shared on a means that protects the provenance of the source. Actually, I think that's more common than is often accepted. The information sharing objective is to enhance the understanding of security actors outside the public sector and to explain why they need to address security as a key issue. Also, information sharing encourages greater security contributions to become part of the solution by providing time and effort to greater corporate and public protection. If the actor is a company, it means that security is an essential item at board level. One benefit immediately of this first stage of the road to inclusive and comprehensive CT is that you achieve force multiplication. For instance, most nations in this room, there are more private security guards than sworn police officers. Thus, it makes good sense that private sector guards should go about their duties every day with the benefit of informed briefing and up-to-date local information. The result is an immediate increase in the effectiveness of public vigilance. Let me offer you shortly a brief, modest example of a public-private partnership which produced practical results and are based on a whole-of-society foundation. In London, before the 2012 the Olympics, the public authorities were understandably very keen that London should be a safe city for the duration of the Summer Olympics and the Paralympics. To their great credit, senior Scotland Yard officers consulted widely across the private sectors and sought options for closer cooperation to improve overall safety and security. The immediate private sector response, which you may predict from what I've said, is that the extra effort should begin with greater information sharing. This was confirmed in practice when riots took place in the year before the Olympics in 2011, and it was certainly a fact and communicated to the public authorities that the public sector were not kept in the loop and the communication was substandard. Happily, in the summer of 2012, the communications hub was established with joint manning, public-private personnel, team members, which cascaded information on a timely, accurate and authoritative basis. The initiative proved a great success, provided great reassurance to the public sector, and it was taken forward as an efficient and timely conduit of relevant information. The key to the accuracy of the information was that all information came from the public sector, not the private sector. So, surprisingly, what we remember now of the Summer Olympics in terms of safety is that it produced the unexpected result of a baby boom, which was of unprecedented levels and remains an unexpected result of the initiative, although I think we cannot claim credit for that activity. The success of the project has led to a demand for continuation, and the cross-sector platform has now been expanded all across the UK, out of London, and it's called the CWSC. The CWSC regions are the same as the UK counter-terrorist units and are the same as the business crime regions. The result is a positive local security effort in all 11 regions of the UK. Sadly, this was put to the test in 2017 when the tragic series of 5 terrorist attacks led to a further effort, which we call the Step Change Programme. The direction of travel of that programme is greater self-help and security on the part of commercial and other locations, with the private sector being encouraged to make an even greater contribution to public-private partnerships. This momentum will continue. I'm confident because there are various driving forces. The first of those is Coroner's inquests after the death, sadly, of the victims, and after-action reviews and inquiries, which have generated a whole range of actions which irresistibly demand further progress. Victims groups supporting greater commercial extension to security are also understandably engaged. The Manchester bomb in March of 2017 was at a concert venue and attended by mainly young people. And the victims' families are very understandably vigorously advocating better commercial security. There are also the benign factors of corporate social responsibility and protection of corporate reputation, which are positive factors. Finally, what should we need to do to move this forward? And I, again, will use the example of the United Kingdom. The partnership principle needs to be operating across all elements of the private sector. It's regrettably the case that even some large businesses are insufficiently engaged, yet alone wider elements of society. SMEs are not encompassed effectively, and specific incentives which could readily improve the greater engagement are not yet seriously addressed. More could be done by local civic authorities who already have resilience responsibilities under UK law. Out with the public sector, insurance is a potential lever to better security, providing expertise, financial incentive, and assisting a speedy return to normality. Local planning decisions by local authorities are sometimes not supportive of necessary static security measures. The advice and guidance which the public sector provides, often completely freely and in various helpful formats, is insufficiently taken up and embraced to a greater commitment of staff security, something that could be readily achieved and would have immediate benefits. But above all, there is a need for a strategic debate to assess present achievement and to aim for ownership of a future trajectory towards a more comprehensive and inclusive counter-terrorism, with the object of greater future public protection based on a whole of society foundation. Furthermore, last point, such a modified, comprehensive and inclusive CT approach is the very best preparation for the terrorist innovation that this conference has dramatically illustrated is absolutely inevitable. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Sorry,